Hello, and welcome back to the Wheel Talk podcast. My name is Abby Mickey, and we are here to talk about women's cycling. I'm joined by Loren Rowney. Hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm the one who got off easy this podcasting session.
We're not going to talk about what time it is.
We're recording at a very normal hour over 3 time zones.
Yeah, it's apparently really, really hard to find a little slot of time that works for Australia, Europe, and the US. It's not an easy feat. Matt Deneve?
Hello. Thanks for having me back. I think I'll let you know by the end of this podcast whether I'm happy to be here or not. But
okay, yeah, that's fair.
No, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me back, and excited to dive into this week's topic.
Yeah, and actually, if y'all didn't know, Matt released new music with his brother that I've been listening to for the last week. That's really good. We're going to talk about it over on the Album Files podcast. Shameless plug for our other. Yeah. It's called Bad Winds Blow.
That's it. Hart. Yep. It was written and recorded in a single day. Yep.
Written and recorded.
Yep. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah. 12 hours
Impressive.
From start to finish. It was completely manic, but awesome as well.
I don't know if it's a shameless plug if I'm plugging your stuff.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate it.
You didn't know I was going to do that.
I didn't. I've been blindsided, but I'm very happy to be blindsided. So thank you.
Well, we're here to talk women's cycling, but before we dive into that, this episode of the Wheel Talk podcast is supported by the members of the Escape Collective. There's actually multiple tiers of membership, so you can either go in full tilt and become a member, have access to the Discord, you receive an exclusive members-only newsletter, stuff like that. But you can also just choose one of the other tiers, and it gives you access to all the great content that we're creating over on the site. There's a bunch of awesome stuff over there. Highly recommend it. So check out that. If you're not a member already, become a member. And if you are a member, a little bonus thing that we just kind of started up. If you're a member, you get access to special podcast episodes. And we are going on hiatus for the off season. Loren watches cyclocross, but I do not. And we bumbled our way through multiple seasons of trying to talk about cyclocross. And I think that for me, I need to just stay in my lane because unfortunately I also need an off season from bike racing. So we're taking a hiatus, but I'm still going to be producing episodes. We've got some great interviews that I've done over the year and also that I will do in the future. I've got a chat with Ezra Tromp coming up, which I'm super excited about. That's going to be a really fun episode. So if you are a member, you get access to that. Just another little perk of being a member, if you didn't know.
And not a perk for members necessarily, but what about your newsletter, Abby? You've got to give that a plug as well.
Oh, I have a newsletter. Yeah, I do have a newsletter. Yeah, it's called the Wheel Talk newsletter. It's kind of an accompaniment to this. And the first episode, the first couple, installments of it. I do a little bit of pulling from what we talk about during the episode and do a bit of a deeper dive into that. So last week we talked about the situation at Jumbo-Visma, so I dove into that a little bit on the newsletter. But I'm also going to do like some interviews in there and whatever it's my own project. So it's whatever I feel like writing about at the time, whatever I feel like you need to know, which is pretty cool. It gives me like a very creative edge to it, which has been fun. So if you haven't seen that, you can check out the newsletter on escapecollective.com, or you can subscribe and get it straight into your inbox every week. Matt, you also have a newsletter.
I do. It's less focused on women's cycling than yours is, but I look at Australian and New Zealand cycling, kind of a roundup of what's going on in that space, not only road cycling, but some mountain biking, some cross, if there are any cyclocross riders from Australia or New Zealand who are competing at a high level, track stuff when that comes up, whatever's going on basically in Aussie and Kiwi cycling. It's racing focused, but also some fun stuff around that.
Yeah, the dud. It's very good. It's not a dud at all, but I love I feel like you've leaned into the dud nickname.
Yeah, you've got to lean in, right?
Yeah, you can't. You just can't take things too seriously sometimes. You know, this is how I approach life. All right, let's talk about some women's cycling. We've got a bit of news today, some transfers, and also we were going to talk about up and comers and young talent to watch, which is very exciting. There's some really great ones out there, and we've got multiple U23 races developing. So it's going to be a topic, hopefully, that we're going to know more and more about, because at the moment, not a ton of coverage for that, not a ton of opportunities for young riders or developing riders, but it seems like there's more coming. So excited to dive into that. Before we do that, the main transfers of the week were more 18-year-olds to Lidl-Trek. Lidl-Trek has now signed in total 5 18-year-olds. And so they just recently announced Floor Moors, the Belgian cyclocross rider, and Felicity Wilson Haffenden, the Aussie rider who won the junior TT at the World Championships.
Yeah, really excited to see what Felicity can do. I've got a request out with her at the moment. I'm hoping to speak to her in the next few days for the Down Under Digest that we just mentioned. But yeah, she's a super talent, and there's a lot of excitement about her here and what she can achieve. And I think, you know, she talked about the excitement of joining Lidl-Trek and speaking to Ina and to Kunda Court and being, pumped up about what they were able to offer her in terms of her development. So, yeah, she'll be one to watch for sure. Obviously, a huge talent when it comes to time trialing.
And a good head on her shoulders as well. I got to see the juniors when they were here in Belgium this year, and actually I took Fliss last year to a kermesse where she got third when I just stepped in for a day to help out. And definitely a rider who has, she missed out on the World Championships in Australia last year, didn't make the team, and then just from the get-go in January just came out guns a-blazing, winning both the road race and the time trial, and I think as well the Oceanas. And speaking to Donna Ray Zielinski, she knew in her heart that if it all went to plan, Fliss would probably walk away with a World Championship jersey. And she did. It was unfortunate she crashed out of the road race, because I think she would have had a great day there too. But yeah, excited as well to see what the future holds for her.
This is an interesting, we got I asked for questions on the Discord, on the Wheel Talk channel in Discord, and somebody asked about the situation at Lidl-Trek, and that they've signed 6 new riders. 5 of them are 18, and one of them is Clara Caponi, who's going to be focused mostly on the track for next year. And it's very interesting, because Trek is one of the teams that doesn't have a development team, but they've kind of made a huge portion of their elite team now into development riders, which I think if you look at their season this year, a lot of it was bad luck, but a lot of it was that they were just short riders. And to sign 5 18-year-olds is an interesting move on their part, in terms of that they were really missing something this year. And I don't know if this is going to fill that gap or not. I think probably I would lean towards not, just because what they need is, I mean, we'll see. Ellen Van Dijk is planning to come back, so we'll see if that kind of makes the team, what they were the last couple years, just having her back on the roster. But yeah, I don't know. I was excited about the first couple, because it gives an opportunity to young riders that I think is really cool. But the fact that they've signed 5, I think, is a little bit ambitious, and also is maybe not great for those riders in terms of development. If you're like 1 or 2 18-year-olds on a team, you get more attention towards that development. If you're one of 5, I think that you could get passed over, because at a certain point the team is going to need to get results, and they're going to need you to do a job, and there's not going to be any leeway for you to learn and grow, because they need you to do something. And yeah, I don't know. It's a tricky situation, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. It would be sweet if they just had a development team, but yeah, they've just went ahead and signed them all to the World Tour team.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, so that there's 5 young riders that have been signed over the past months. Are they all multidiscipline riders except for Fliss?
Yeah.
Or at least Yeah, so I think, I mean, Trek, as long as everything goes to plan next year, and they have a healthy roster, they've still got that really core squad that's been there for years, plus the addition of Amanda Spratt and Brodie Chapman. So they had an awful year, I think, in terms of injury and illness. But if everyone lines up next year, raring to go, because again, it's an Olympic year as well, I think the core riders will definitely, as per usual, get the pick of the races they need to do in terms of qualification or goals, etc. And then Fliss being the only road rider without doing cross or mountain bike or any other disciplines, I'm sure she'll probably start her season a little later than the other riders and come in for the smaller spring classics and fill those gaps there. That's how I anticipate they'll be doing it.
I think they'd probably want her like on form for the Aussie races.
Yeah, but then to come down and then come back up. Because it's a lot for a young rider to be good. But honestly, knowing those bigger teams, and because they're European, she doesn't necessarily have to be on form there, because she's not going to win the nationals. Not in an Olympic year, I'm sorry. I know Sarah Gigante has done that in the previous years, but I don't see that happening, to be honest. And also not in such an important year for the other riders that are on that team. And for such a young rider, speaking from experience racing on a European team as my first team, there was no emphasis on nationals because they didn't want me to burn out. And if you're not a seasoned rider to show up there flying, like if you do that, they're going to make you come down before you come back up.
Yeah, it seems to me like signing a bunch of 18-year-olds is obviously a play for the future. It's not for next year. It's for 2025 or 2026. And I guess they're hoping that, as Loren said, that core group of hitters will be the ones that are shouldering most of the load. So your Balsamos, your Lucinda Brands, Brodie Chapman, Lizzie Deignan, Elisa Longo-Borghini, Gaia Riolini, who I'm sure we'll talk about today, Amanda Spratt, Van Anrooy, Van Dijk. Like, there's a huge list there of very strong riders. So if everything goes to plan, they have better luck than they did this season. They should still be able to get results while also providing opportunities for those younger riders.
Yeah, I think I know for the future, it's great if they develop them properly. That's a huge caveat. Like they have to develop them properly in order for it to be a good investment for the future, because you can sign young riders all you want, but then if you neglect to give them what they need, they're going to retire early. They're going to leave the team. So that doesn't mean anything. But I also think that this year was so disappointing. And I don't think it was only because of the injuries and the bad luck that they had. I think that there was also some issues with them not filling Ellen's spot. Ellen was gone the entire season. They had an opportunity to fill her spot on the team with another rider because of the maternity leave rules that the UCI put into place, and they chose not to do that until way later in the season when they signed a triathlete who's incredibly talented but didn't race a single day with the team. And they needed that person. Like by the time they got to the end of the season, they were fielding like 4 riders at races. Like they needed another rider on the team. But they also, like, we forgot that they also lost Leah Thomas early in the year, like late in last season, and she had a contract this year. And Taylor was out. But Leia, when she left the team, the UCI gave the team a chance to sign a new person to that spot, and they didn't. So they had 2 completely empty spots of riders who were gone in Leia and in Ellen. And then, like, obviously Lizzie was coming back and Taylor was gone. So it was like they also could have they could have counterbalanced the fact that they were missing riders, even with the riders that were injured. Riders are always going to get injured and sick throughout the year, but they were already down multiple riders from the start that they could have fixed. And I feel like having that been the year this year, and the fact that they're 3rd in the UCI rankings this year below Canyon SRAM is wild, like given how well they've performed as a team since they started. And going into next year, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the team, a lot of pressure on Lidl as a new sponsor who wants to be the best team in the world, a lot of pressure from them for the team to step it up and be the best team in the world. And in order to do that, they need to look at what happened this year and be like, okay, we need to figure out this situation before next year. So even though it is a good investment for the future, they also need to perform well next year. So it's kind of like a we'll see type situation, I feel like. It could be totally fine. I hope it is. But it is, that jump from junior into elite is getting wider and wider and wider and wider. And yet we're still expecting these 18-year-olds to be able to do it. And at a certain point, there needs to be more steps. There needs to be rocks for them to be able to jump across the gap. You know?
Yeah. Where I guess that's a good segue into the under 23 calendar, but we don't probably go into that too much. But before, I mean, there weren't that many. I think maybe the junior world champions would secure contracts on pro teams. I'm trying to think over the past 10, 15 years, but to have so many junior riders straight into World Tour teams, I'd say this year is maybe the most amount ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think so. I think so for sure.
If we think of all the names in the past few months, which is exciting, but yeah, it does raise the point too. I'm still trying to figure out in my head if this is the case moving forwards, if World Tour teams are going to just continuously take up all the juniors year after year, where does the under 23 calendar fall into play? What sort of riders will turn up for those races? I mean, Tour de l'Avenir this year, it was the first time it was run. I think when it was run in the calendar year was good timing because teams were able to release their riders to national teams. But if they did build that out, I don't think you'd see that many of the top U23 riders being able to turn up to those races. Unless, if we look at what Trek is doing, so they've got a bunch of new young riders. They're factoring that in perhaps into the future that, you know, they can go into the lower ranked races and then send them off on their national teams to do these races because it'll be a great experience for them and just great for the sport too.
That would be the sensible way to go about it.
Yeah, because the other thing is you need the calendar to give those U23 riders an opportunity, but you also need teams outside of the World Tour they're going to support them, and that is getting better. Like doing the prep for this episode, I actually didn't even realize that Israel Premier Tech Roland has a development team as well. So more and more teams are picking up development teams, and that's definitely going to help with that situation. There's U23 Paris-Roubaix next year.
That's right.
Very quietly.
It's going to run on the morning of the men's race.
Yeah, they very quietly threw that in there. Like, very little information is out there about it, but it's on the calendar, which is super cool. We have one more transfer to talk about before we dive into the rest of the episode. And that is that Kristen Faulkner has been announced to EF Education Cannondale for next year. So away from Jayco Lula, who she's been with for 2 years now, and then joining EF for the next year. It's not returning, but in a weird, complicated way that the EF team is. She was on Tibco when she made her start. So depending on which staff moves over, she will be riding with some people that she's ridden with before. Obviously, Veronica Ewers, she was teammates with on Tibco. So. Yeah, Faulkner to EF. She's had a quiet year.
A lot of people have been asking, I think I've seen on Discord, there's been a bit of question marks around where she was going and her season and everything. So I'm really curious to see what 2024 looks like for her. But I did read that Clara Hossinger, the very good cyclocross rider, hasn't been confirmed to a team yet. And the same goes for the British rider.
Abby Smith?
No. She's been out for a while now with injury and illness.
Lizzie Banks.
One is stage or two. Lizzie Banks.
Yeah.
Still not knowing what she is doing next year.
She's had a brutal couple years. She had a really bad crash and had a really, really bad concussion. that took her out for like a full season, and then she got COVID, and she had like long COVID and was suffering from like the after effects of that for a really long time, and she only really came back this year. And I think her goal was to make it to the Tour, but she's really had a rough couple of hands dealt to her the last couple of years.
Well, for a rider like that, it's unfortunate because she was just sort of coming into her own. Her name was noticed. People noticed her as well. Like, she was really a competitor in the peloton. And then you have a few years out and people kind of forget about you. When I mean people, I mean teens. Like we've just been saying, there's all this young blood that's coming through. So quite often it's hard to get a contract.
Other riders as well. Sarah Roy, we still don't know where she's going. Nothing's been said about that.
Nothing said. Yeah.
And Nicole Frayne as well, former Aussie champ, was with Park Hotel Valkenburg. She's no longer with the team. She's finishing up with them at the end of the year. I was speaking to her today. She can't say who she's going to next year, but she's hopeful she'll continue racing in the Pro Peloton next year. So, still to be confirmed.
Sarah Roy is a big name. I mean, she's been a big name in Australian cycling. So this late in the season, it's always a bit iffy if the announcement hasn't come.
Yeah, I got the sense from her that she has got something lined up, but they just haven't announced it yet for whatever reason that might be. Let's hope that's all good.
I wonder if she's going to the track.
She is doing more track stuff. Yeah, she's definitely doing more track stuff in the Aussie summer in particular, with a hope of getting on the Team Pursuit team for Paris later next year. But she definitely wants to race the classics again in 2024, so she'll need to be on a big team for that.
And with a rider like Roy, I think Roy must be about 38 this year. 36, 7, 37. So maybe 2024 is also her last year. Could be. So
no, Paris Olympics team pursuit, go out with a bang. I think actually on Faulkner, that'll be a huge goal for her as well, the Olympics. She was one of the riders that arbitrated the selection for the U.S. Olympics for the Tokyo team, and she was unsuccessful in ousting Corinne Lebecki from the team in order to gain a spot. But the Olympics are a huge goal for her, and so she'll be eyeing the Paris Olympics, and arguably a better course for her than Tokyo would have been. So.
Faulkner's also signed a 3-year deal, I believe, which is a nice vote of confidence in her for the future.
Yep. Yep. On kind of the topic of young riders in the peloton and the lack of support for them, it came out this week that the British junior champ, former British national junior champ, she is retiring at 25, stating that she couldn't earn enough money to make a living, and she's still living with her parents. And this is something that I feel like we've talked about a lot, is the widening wage gap between the World Tour and the rest of the peloton, and a lot of the teams that race with the World Tour teams that have no minimum wage set into place. And she raced for
Life Plus Wahoo, and she also raced, I think she did 3 years with Arkea before going across, and so this is just actually someone on the Discord, Andy has said that like Drops is a team who does try to do the best for their riders and nurture British talent, and they have done so, but it appears like there is a huge dropout rate, and I think that's just the case that if the riders don't make the jump, like Lizzie Holden has done to UAE, for example, where I'm assuming she's earning now a decent contract, Wahoo just simply hasn't had the money to be able to offer contracts that we would say you could live independently from.
Yeah, and if we remember last year, the team almost folded. They had Nicole pull out of sponsorship. Yeah. So this year in particular, they were low on money because that's a team that's had the goal of joining the World Tour, and a team that would make a really great pro team, the tier in between Continental and World Tour. But a team that, especially this year, would have struggled to give their riders a living wage. But there's many teams like it out there that are just not paying their riders. And that was highlighted in the Cyclist Alliance survey from a couple weeks ago, that a massive percentage of the peloton is not making a living wage. And that gap is growing and growing and growing as the top riders make more and more. So it's just a bummer to see because, 25 and having to retire because you live with your parents is like not how you want a career to end. That sucks.
I imagine there's a whole lot of other riders that are in the same boat as that are forced into the same decision, but maybe haven't made headlines in the same way. They kind of just disappear from the sport, which, obviously not a great thing. And hopefully the sport's moving in the right direction slowly.
But it's that discussion that we've had. There's just too much of a growing gap between the very top and, I'm not going to say the bottom, but the lower tiered teams. They just can't bridge that gap. They're just not getting the money from the sponsors. And if you can't afford to pay your riders, and I understand it, when you hit 25, you do start thinking about the future. I had the same crisis at 27, and that's essentially one of the reasons I walked away, because I was just like, this isn't sustainable anymore. Will I ever earn more? And I didn't want to wait around. That's very different now. And if I'd stayed on the same team, I actually would have earned a good wage a few years later. But that's sort of this whole bridging the gap thing as well. And the jump from the juniors to World Tour, like, I guess when you're young, you give yourself a few years and you're happy to be making, not really a decent salary, because if you look perhaps at your peers who finish school and go off to university and study, they'd be in a similar position until they get their degree. And that's kind of like with cycling, you do your internship or your apprenticeship for a few years, and then hopefully, you grow and you develop and you find your feet in the peloton, and then you start to begin to earn that wage. But for some, if you don't make the jump, there's just always new talent coming in, and it seems, to get into those few teams that are paying decent salaries, there's not that many spots.
We'll see what the UCI's they've announced that there will be a pro team tier in 2025, but they haven't laid out exactly what that looks like. So I'm interested to see the details of that, like what the minimum wage is there. There's a minimum wage for the pro team tier on the men's side. So I'm curious to see how that plays into the women's side.
What is that sitting at? About 36 or?
I think so.
Something like that.
Something along the lines of that, yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes. In better, more exciting, or more like positive, I guess, talking point, Vittoria Busi's completely smashed Ellen Van Dijk's hour record. And I remember when Ellen Van Dijk did her hour record last year with the full might of Trek behind her, with like all the best equipment and testing and all of this, to get her hour record, which was 49.254 kilometers, that we were like, that's going to stand the test of time. It did not. Vittoria completely blew it out of the park. She passed the 50K barrier at 50.267, I believe was her mark at the end, which is just incredibly impressive. And Ellen was a great sport about it as well. But it's really cool. I mean, I feel like there was a huge bit of hour record hype back in the day when like Bradley Wiggins was going for the hour record, and it's dropped off a bit, and there's still like every once in a while there's a rider who's like, I think I'm gonna try the hour record. But man, she killed it. That was a super impressive accomplishment.
What I love about this is there was so much hype around, like you said, Ellen doing it, because obviously as a Lidl-Trek rider, they really like amped it up. There was the live stream and everything. Everyone was on board. I think we were watching it, and then this just like passed me in the news almost. I remember months ago that Victoria was going for it, but it's kind of like a bit of a forgotten thing. And then it's like, oh, she came out and just smashed it out of the ballpark. Yeah. I love that.
Super
the underdog.
Cool.
Yeah. More than 2 kilometers further than her previous world record, which was set 5 years earlier. Both of those records she set at altitude in Mexico. And by contrast, Van Dijk's was in Switzerland, so a bit of a difference there, but still an incredible ride. And to be the first woman to ride over 50k in the hour is, pretty remarkable effort, really. I hope we hear more about that in the weeks to come. Hopefully they shot some kind of documentary about it or something. I'd love to learn more about it.
In other racing news, we had the Tour of Chongming Island over the weekend, which is a 3-day sprinters race in China, a world tour. But there wasn't a ton of talking points around it, so we're still gonna glaze over the results a bit. Maylene de Zoet, the Dutch rider from Certes at WNT, won the first stage. The second stage was taken by Hannah Strack of one of the smaller teams at the race, and the final stage and the overall was won by Chiara Consoni, who I just love. I love her. She's amazing. Her energy is just incredible. I loved her.
Wasn't she your victory for the overall win?
She was, but then nobody responded to my message about their own picks, so I just took the picks section out of the preview because no one said anything, and I was like, well, it is late.
Abby picked it.
Yeah, I called it. I mean, I feel like looking at the start list that she was the favorite, and I'm surprised that she only won one stage, to be honest. But yeah, it was a lot of sprinting, and we got one more World Tour race to go this week with the Tour of Guangxi on Tuesday. With the Tour of Guangxi on Tuesday, so today, as you're listening to this podcast, if you listen to it as soon as it drops, which why wouldn't you? And then next week we'll talk about the World Tour rankings and relegation and a little bit of Olympic selection. But yeah, we got one more race to go, and there's a lot of pretty much the same rosters will be at Guangxi because the teams that have traveled to China to do the race have only sent the one team to do both races, so it'll be a lot of the same. But it's a little bit spicier. Guangxi, there's a climb in there and everything, so it will be interesting. Not sure if there's live coverage. It was really touch and go whether or not Chongming Island was going to have live coverage, and they did in the end. But Guangxi does not have anything at the moment that I'm aware of. So we'll see.
I'd love to be more interested in these races. I feel like they suffer from end of seasonitis a lot actually, and we've talked for a little while about how it felt like the season was kind of over after, I don't know, the Tour, Worlds, whatever you want to say. But it's just, I mean, I'm all for these races, and I was lucky enough to go to the first edition of Tour of Guangxi back in the day, and I loved being there. But yeah, it's just unfortunate they fall at the time they do, and unfortunate for Tour of Chongming Island in particular that it's such a flat race. I know the sprinters love it, the opportunity, but there's just not a whole lot to get all that excited about. So it is a bit of a shame.
But yeah, on that note, it's a race you don't really want to watch. That sounds terrible, but you look at the results, but it's like the Delhi road race in 2010, going up and down a massive road. No one wants to watch that.
There was a great shot with about 2Ks to go on the first stage, coming in on a highway with like 4 lanes to the finish, and the riders, literally 25 of them across the road. The peloton's 25 riders wide. And it's just a different world, really.
All right, let's talk about some up-and-comers and young talent, because this is a really exciting topic, and I think we'll dive into it in a bit today, but we'll definitely get to it more in the future, because a lot of these riders are riders I think we will be talking about next year and in the years to come. I feel like starting out with the obvious answer, which is most of Canyon SRAM's new crop, in mostly they're German riders, Ricarda Bauernfeind and Antonia Niedermeyer, but there's other riders on that team that I think are going to surprise us in the years to come, and next year in particular. One of the members asked who is the team that is going to rival SC Works next year, and I feel like there's only one answer, and it's Canyon SRAM, with the way that they figured things out this year, and if they continue to do that in the future, I think that they're going to be a serious force, and as those riders develop. But yeah, I'm really excited to see what specifically Niedermeyer can do in the future, man. She's really exciting.
Only 20 years old. How exciting, though, that now we're talking about Canyon SRAM being the only team that can really rival SD Works. And yet the start of the season, we were like, oh, Canyon SRAM, they just can't get a win. They just can't, they're always there, but they can't do anything. And now they've got this huge crop of exciting talent. The German riders you mentioned, Maaike van der Down, who's going to be a huge force for them in the Classics next year. Zoe Backstedt, of course, as well as Chloe Dygert as well, of course, who was great this year and still growing so much as a rider. Really exciting to see what that team can do next year, and some great talents for all sorts of races.
And if not next year, I think in 2025, 26. Because, there are some riders, we were talking about teams like Lidl-Trek that are coming to the end of their game, I think. And in the next year or so, we're going to see a lot of the names that we talk about a lot potentially leaving the sport.
Yeah, I think, Canyon SRAM, I'm really excited about them. They're pretty much like 85% of their team is up and coming young talent. So, I've been impressed with them this year. And like Matt said, the turnaround from our beginning of the year convo to like them being second overall in the UCI rankings at the moment is just wild and really cool to watch. I feel like you can lump other teams into the up and coming talent conversation, and one of them is the Phoenix de Koenig team. Next year, I am just like so excited to see Puck Pieterse on the road. She's obviously phenomenal in the mountain bike and cross, and just such an exciting rider. One of my dad's favorites. I went to the World Cup in Andorra with Lila, and we were there specifically to see Kate Courtney. I made her a friendship bracelet and chocolate chip cookies, and I was really excited. And I was like, Dad, we saw Kate Courtney. And he was like, but did Lila get a picture with Puck? And I was like, no, I did not go request that Puck take a picture with my baby. But I'm going to have to in the future because I think she is a rider.
Next year, cyclocross.
Yeah.
End of season.
That's true.
Who knows? She might do gravel worlds in Belgium.
I'm really pushing for it. I've been influencing my husband that we need to go to Belgium. And yeah, Lila has cousins there even. Like, it would be great.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, I feel like Puck, like she has, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way that she races cyclocross, the way that she races mountain bike, and also what we've seen on the road, particularly Strada Bianchi, she has no fear like Cassia New-O'Donnell. She just reminds me of a young Cassia who first burst onto the scene. So we know the trajectory of her career. So I think, and being Dutch as well, the sky's the limit for this young rider. It will just be a question of managing three disciplines, I think. And we've seen that in the past, how when mismanaged, maybe just due to a bit too much enthusiasm, riders can burn out. You can bounce back, but that would be the key here.
Yeah, I think you're referring mostly to Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, who tried to do all three, won all three world titles in the same calendar year.
Very young.
Yeah, and then had to step away from road and cyclocross for a long time, and now just races on the mountain bike. But that team has some other really exciting talent. I mean, Christina Schweinberger, who was third in the TT at Worlds and fifth in the road race, like I can't wait to see what she can do with that confidence boost. And Petra Stiaski from Switzerland is another rider on that team that I think is a little bit very up and coming, super young, had a great couple performances scattered throughout the year, but I think is going to be a rider that we're going to watch in the future. And Switzerland as a team is a nation that's really coming through the ranks at the moment, and a lot of it we can point to obviously Marlon Reusser for that, but there's other riders on the Swiss side that are exciting prospects for the future, and I think Petra is one of them. And Marta Troyen of Belgium, who I probably did not pronounce her name right, but she's another young rider on that team that I think that I'm really excited for in the future. There's just that team is like, it's the way that they race, but also they seem to inspire like a lot of go out, try it. If it doesn't work, try it again. I feel like it's a great environment for riders to learn what works, learn what doesn't work, and succeed in making mistakes. So I feel like that they're a team that just in general, you could look at those blue jerseys and be like, all right, up and comer, young, or just like, and someone who is exciting to watch.
Yeah, we saw that at the Tour de France Femme Avec Swift, didn't we? They were just so aggressive every day, backing it up with great rides. Martha Truan was great in the break on the day that Yara Castelline won the stage, and standing at the team bus after that win, just seeing the team spirit and the way they all got around each other was really cool. So yeah, I definitely agree. An exciting bunch to look at with some great riders going forward.
So I think sometimes when riders make that jump from under 19 to the elite ranks, as an under 19, the racing's a little bit more chaotic. Teams aren't really organized as teams. They're still learning actually how to race their bikes in how, we come to learn to race professionally. But maybe that's what Phoenix has done really well at harnessing, and what Canyon Tram's doing a bit is just, take that enthusiasm you have to just race a bike and have a crack. And, the sort of tactics that we see in men's races, the predictability that we sometimes see now in women's racing, the riding the front, positioning your team leaders, that sort of thing, having just one leader in the race. Instead of doing that, where I think they'd have less chance of getting a result, they're just going in and racing how they know how to race, and bouncing off one another. Mm-hmm. That's what I love.
Yeah.
Because I think when you're a young rider and you say go to a Lidl-Trek or something, you're not going to have as many opportunities to race how the Phoenix to Koenig riders race.
That's way more organized over there.
Mm-hmm.
Organized tactics for the race, and just a clear leader, which will completely change the situation. I think as far as Movistar, they've signed some young talent for next year that I'm curious about, but as far as riders that are on the team at the moment, Paola Patino is a rider that we didn't mention in the Domestique chat, but was brought up on the Discord. And I think that she's a rider that has been in the game for a really long time. She's been on Movistar for a really long time, and she's got some really under the radar results. And I'm curious to see if she's going to be given any freedom, if she's ever going to surprise us with a performance at some point, and I wouldn't be surprised. She's a rider who's super consistent, and I'm curious about. Signed through 2025 as well. Huge vote of confidence.
Sarah Gigante too. She's had an awful year or two, but she's still with the team next year, and if she can get everything right, she's still very much a young and up and coming rider with a lot of exciting things ahead, hopefully. So fingers crossed for her next year, and yeah, it'd be good to see her up amongst it again.
DSM has some riders that I think are there. Obviously, most of their team is kind of young, but they've got some up and coming riders that this year were a bit overshadowed by the Pfeiffer Georgie Charlotta Cool of it all. But Nunca Vink, the 19-year-old on that team, she had some really impressive, quiet results, kind of just chipping away. And so did one of their French riders, Eglantine Reyer. She rode super well. I think it was Tour Scandinavia. That team's going to continue to develop them. If there's anything that team can do, it's uplift young riders. So I'm curious to see what happens with some of the riders on that team that they signed last year when there was a lot of their core team left. They basically just signed young riders. Jumbo has a couple other interesting ones, like Naomi Ruig, who's going to EF next year. She had some great performances this year, and I think is another exciting Swiss rider to watch. Obviously, Fem Van Empel, who's very well known on the cross side, but has only recently made an impact on the road side. And I think for her, she was learning a lot this year, learning through mistakes this year, but I think she's a rider to watch in the future. Definitely going to be super exciting to see what she does. And Kim Kadzo as well, who's also going to EF. I think that's going to be a really great environment for her as a young Kiwi over there in an English speaking team. So yeah, I think that there's a couple really exciting Jumbo riders that are leaving the team and a couple that are staying. And I feel like Fem is probably the one that I'm most interested in.
How much road racing is she going to be doing next year? Do we know? Because she's obviously got cross, as you mentioned, but how much of a focus is road going to be? Do we know that yet?
I would assume because it's an Olympic year and there's no cross in the Olympics that she would probably lean heavier onto the road side. But I'm not sure. I mean, that team is going through a little bit of a change at the moment. So I'm curious to see if they will want her to lean more into the road, if they're going to push her to lean more into the road because they need her presence on the team. And that her cyclocross will take a hit because of that.
I mean, she's a young Dutchie. I think her chances of making the Olympic team, when we look at who will be going for those 4 spots, are pretty slim, because she hasn't had as much experience on the road. So I would say Fem will go for the world title again in cross this year, probably have a small rest and then come back to support for the classics, where she's going to have to be riding for Anna Henderson and Marianne Vos, who I'm sure still has her eyes on another Olympics, whether that will be the case.
It just occurred to me that the Dutch Olympic team next year is like Demi, Lorena, Vos. Like, they're going to be so good. They're almost scarier. They're almost scarier without the Van der Breggen, Van Annemiek duo, because that duo was, while they were phenomenal, they threw a wrench in the Dutch because they don't work well together. But that will not be the case for next year's team, which is yikes.
Well, I think they're always the team that can basically field a team who can do everything. So whatever the race situation is, there's very few teams that can say we can put someone in every move, in every type of terrain, and know that we can have the outcome for the win. Now, 2020 Olympics was a bit of a freak sort of
weird race. Yeah.
Weird race that happened. But any other situation, I think it's always the Dutch, particularly with this weird composition of 4 that we see.
How weird is it that looking at the way that this year went, Vos is like in question of whether she will make the Olympic team. What a world.
I mean, Vos has been to how many Olympics now?
A bajillion.
I think 2000. So since 2008, she's been to every Olympics, right? And this could be the year. I mean, it's Vos, like you said, but Van Dijk is also going for it again, because she has her eyes set on the time trial. And I think the Dutch have 3 spots in the time trial even.
And Brianna Marcus,
I mean, she could be a rider.
Like, hands down the best time trialist in the Netherlands at the moment on the road.
If Shirin has another great year, she could make the team based on results for the road team. So
I'm writing
I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole. We could go
down the rabbit hole. It's so true. Leia Cournier of the DSM team. She's a young French rider on the DSM team, and she's going to FDJ next year for 2 years. And I think she's super exciting. She was second behind Niedermeyer in the youth classification at the Tour de l'Avenir, which is a funny classification, I feel like, at a U23 race. But she's a rider who I think has a lot of potential, and I think we will get to know her name a little bit more in the future. SU Works new signing. They've only signed 1 new rider for next year, Femke Gerritsen, and she's a rider who, one of those Park Hotel Valkenburg riders who's made the jump to SU Works. And we talked about her briefly when the announcement was made that she would be moving over to SU Works, but she's a super exciting and slightly terrifying rider for the future, for sure.
Yeah, and they still have, I know she's not super young, but Blanca Vas, I guess, is still only 22 actually. So still, yeah, she is still very young and very much on the way up, and got her first World Tour wins this year. So I think expect good things from her, obviously. And then also Misha Bredewald as well, who is only 23 now as well. So, and already winning at World Tour level. So yeah, some more exciting stuff in the future for a team that's already winning everything.
Yeah, Misha Bredewald.
Another example of developing the young. So when the next generation come through. Andrew Demi's in that retire in a few years, they'll basically slot in, and then
SD
it'll
Works
just be
is
more.
a weird one. There are riders that go there that show a lot of promise, and they go there and they are just flattened by the SD Works situation. And then there are riders that just become unstoppable. Yeah. Misha Bredewald, I just love, despite the fact that she somewhat judgmentally told me that she doesn't listen to Taylor Swift anymore. She listened to it when she was younger. She's like 22. Like
also Anna Shackley at SD Works, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
only 22. She was second, third, and second on stages that toured 11 years, second overall. So
yeah,
another young talent.
I think we forget sometimes, and like Neem Fisher Black, she is still very young too, but it's just because we've been talking about them for 3 years now, these riders, it's like it's almost embedded in your head that they've already been there and they're doing that. But it's crazy to think how young they are. And I think even when I was going through the list and thinking of riders, I actually just went onto the website that will not be named and put an age limit in from 19 to 22 to just see who fit into that age group. And I was like, oh my God, you're still under 22.
I think these riders on SD Works also get overlooked because of how dominant the bigger names on the team are. Any of these riders, if they were on a different team, they'd be one of the most exciting riders on the team. But, Blanca Vas had a good year, 2 World Tour wins, and is kind of almost an afterthought, which sounds horrible, but given how good Vollering and everybody else is, she's way down the list.
Yeah. UAE has some exciting riders. I think I'm curious to see what they do in the future. Olivia Burrell, who had an amazing year in 2022, kind of fell off this year a bit, but I think that she's a rider that will get better in the future. And also Elena Ivanchenko, the Russian rider on that team, she won Best Young Rider at Ardèche and Tour Scandinavia. And I think she's a rider that I'm curious to see what she does.
Is she the former junior world champion, perhaps? Is that possible? In the time trial?
Won the Junior World Championship in 2021, TT, and the Europeans. So she's definitely she won a stage of Tour Breton last year. And
that's right.
I think, I'm curious how she will develop. And it's interesting because there's another Russian rider on the scene, Tamara Dronova, who Matt profiled during the Tour de France Femme, and is a very under the radar rider who's just consistently in the top 10, but is very much set aside because of her nationality. I think that that's an interesting thing with Elena as well. How that is going to impact her career and her ability to develop as a rider and have opportunities in the sport.
Yeah, I always wonder about that, where the tipping point is, because I think riders like Dronova are very good, but just outside that top tier, or a couple of tiers down maybe. But at some point, if you start winning enough, people are going to have to talk about you, and the media that have decided not to talk about you are going to have to talk about you. And big teams who are maybe reticent to sign a Russian rider are probably going to have to think about doing that. So I wonder where that tipping point is, and whether Ivanchenko can find that out. It's very complicated. Obviously, I'm not trying to make light of any of the issues around it, but that intersection between sport and politics and all that is challenging for people. And as I wrote, as Abby mentioned during the Tour de France Femme, it's quite an interesting one, and I wonder what that's going to hold for Ivanchenko going forward.
Uno X has some really exciting talent, young talent on the team as well. Anadota had a rough year this year, but I think that next year she's going to be have come back a little bit. I hope she does. She's just a character as well. She was part of Julie Leth's audio diaries last year from the Tour de France Femme. It was a joy to listen to her anecdotes. So I'm curious to see how she does. The 26-year-old Norwegian May Bjorndal Otestad, she's pretty exciting, as well as Rebecca Corner, the 23-year-old Danish rider on that team who won the national championships this year. And there's a Finnish rider on that team, Anina Etasola. Once you get to Scandinavia, man, the names. Imagine it feels like looking at Tom's last name and being like, how do you pronounce that? Which I did when I met him. Anina, she's the Finnish national champion. She's only 20, but she's, I think, a really exciting rider to watch in the future. And
she's a sprinter, right?
And I think being on, a good sprinter. And I think being on Uno X for those riders in particular is just such a great pathway for them to flourish. Being a team that is mostly Scandinavian, it's a team that they will feel comfortable on, which is important. And I don't know how well they're going to be able to develop them into like a top tier type team, but at least give them an opportunity to learn in a good environment before they maybe move on to a better team. But there's definitely some riders on there that I'm curious about. UAE and AG Insurance Next Gen's U23 teams have some really exciting riders on there. Laura Lizette Sander of Estonia had some under the radar results this year, and I think is a really interesting rider for the future. I'm curious to see if they're going to let her ride, or if she can make that jump to the elite team. There's interesting rules because the UCI hasn't really paid any attention to the fact that there are elite teams that have development teams. On the men's side, I think that the Devo riders can stagiaire for the World Tour teams, and on the women's side, it happens less because there's just been less opportunity for there to be development teams connected to a elite team. Like when Canyon SRAM Generation started, I was talking to that team about the situation with their licensing, and they're just two completely separate teams because they can't be connected. Where on the men's side, I think there's a rule on the men's side that elite teams have to have a development team or a women's team or have some kind of ties to a development team. And for on the AG Insurance team, they have Flora Perkins on there, who she was a rider that I feel like we mentioned a couple times last year and was a little bit more under the radar this year, but she's an interesting rider for the future as well. But the AG Insurance Elite team has like a bunch of future stars.
Really young riders?
Yeah, Justine Gurka, she's like super exciting. Julia Borgstrom, we talked about her during the tour. Anya Lau, like the Aussie rider. Matt talked about her a ton last year at the tour, I feel like. She's an exciting rider for the future, for sure.
Yeah, I think she's just extended with the team for another 2 years maybe as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They were super impressed with her when I spoke to the DS last year, Yolinda Horta. She said it's always nice to have an Aussie on the team, but just for how mature Anya came across for such a young rider. And yeah, definitely, again, a rider that, particularly as Aussies, we don't seem to talk about that much, but we need to pay a bit more attention to her. And perhaps just a rider that yet hasn't gotten the opportunities. And speaking of that team, is Ashley Moolman-Passio still with them?
I believe so, but
she signed 2 years.
Yeah, but it's a bit of a question mark, I feel like. I'm curious what she's gonna do. The Olympics doesn't suit her super well next year, and she was supposed to retire last year. So it's intriguing. What did you guys mention? Did you guys think of or write down any up and comers that we didn't just mention?
One I did have down was Eleonora Gasparini for UAE.
Mm-hmm.
She just turned 21 in March and had a bunch of good results through the early part of the season, and then got her first World Tour win with the Tour de Suisse later in the year. I think her contract with UAE ends at the end of this year, so I'm not quite sure what she's up to next year, but she's an exciting rider for sure. And I know these two riders I'm about to mention are more established and they're not as fresh as some of the ones you talked about, Abby, but I do think it's worth just mentioning Shirin Van Anrooy and Guy Riolini for Trek. Van Anrooy is only 21 and Riolini's only 22. So, already winning World Tour races, so established stars in their own right now, I guess, but very much part of that up-and-coming contingent, I guess, and exciting players for the future for Trek. Particularly, as we mentioned, their next season or so is going to be pretty interesting with so many very young riders coming through.
Yeah, I think Ali Wollaston, we forget she's still under 22, and a rider that we've spoken about a lot, again, AG Insurance. I think next year we're going to see, I know she'll be focusing probably track and road, but more track, I would say, for the Olympics. I'm sure she's going to have a really strong spring classics, even though she's probably got her eyes on the Paris Olympics. And then also Megan Jastrab. I don't think we mentioned her. We always forget, but because she is a name and she has gotten some good results, and a rider with huge talent. And like you said before, Abby, another one with a good head on her shoulders. And right now, I had a little look at the riders between 19 to 22, and she's sitting 5th ranked overall out of all of those riders right now. So,
man, it's just so crazy. And then this girl showed up to our team camp and just completely schooled all of us, and now she's just killing it in the World Tour. It's just awesome. I did see her name, and I didn't even think to write her down because I was like, oh yeah, Megan. She's been
here forever.
Yeah.
I think it's because she was so good as an under 19 in the US, and it was a name that you heard, and she was winning races. So again, it's a name you've heard for a few years, so you just forget that they're still so young.
No, but you're right. I think that she's on the European scene, she's barely dipped her toe in. She's gonna be as she continues to do those races and grow, and she's got such a good head on her shoulders. She's so level-headed and so she really knows priorities and how to not make cycling is not her entire be-all end-all, and I think it makes her a better bike racer. That works for some people. Obviously it worked for Annemiek, but some people need to not make it their entire personality, and Megan does a really great job of balance.
Another rider I just thought of too is Cedrine Cabal. Sorry to jump in there. Cabal is 22, and remember she was best young rider at the Tour de France Femme, and kind of went under the radar a little bit as much as you can in the white jersey. But having a look back at her stats from this year, she was top 10 in 4 different stage races, and then 12th overall at the Tour. Was 6th overall at L'Avenir when she left the race. She's got another couple of years with Sarah Tizet, so that'll be really exciting for that team. And yeah, she's obviously a very talented rider that I'm sure we'll see more of.
I'm sure there'll be some rider we've missed, and someone will call us out on Discord.
I hope that they do.
There for.
Yep. Yeah. I hope that they do. I love it when people pay more attention than we do. I wish that there was a better way for us to discern up and coming riders from the non-World Tour teams, from the pro teams. It's just that there's not a ton of opportunity for those riders. So it's hard to pick up on who's going to be the next big crop of riders because there's no coverage of those races, and very little information around them. So unfortunately, it's harder to, on the men's side, there's so many pro races that are live that people can watch, and that the World Tour teams don't all come swarm to and completely demolish. But on the women's side, it's not the same. So we've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again, that there needs to be more opportunities so that we can learn new names. But we'll see that hopefully happen in the future. Let's wrap it up with what we're obsessed with and call it an episode. I've got an emotional one, and it is almost, I have been awake since 4:00 in the morning, so I will try not to cry, but I feel like I'm obsessed with how obsessed my sister is with my daughter.
It's lovely.
Like I knew that she was going to love her. Like I knew that she was going to be a great aunt, but I was not prepared for the amount of just complete, like all-encompassing love that she has for Lila. And it's really been cool to see. I'm at my parents now in Montana with my sister, and she like gets sad when she has to go to work because she won't see Lila for hours. and it's really amazing. I just didn't know that this was going to happen. It's really cool to just kind of see Lila in an environment where she is just so loved. And to have my sister, who's not a huge kids person, just be completely obsessed with her. And I'm obsessed with that. Obsessed with watching her be obsessed.
I guess it's also a bit bittersweet for you because, you know, seeing this and then knowing that you live on the other side of the world too.
Yeah, I was going to say, if anyone understands how hard it is to see your family with your child, and have it be so sporadic, you would, Loren. Because it's like funny, you see on Instagram like parenting hacks. They're all super dumb as far as I've picked up. But one of the funniest parenting hacks is just like live close to your parents. And it's so true. Like it
makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, you live close
I
to
lean heavily.
Hannes's parents. So
we're like very Belgian right now. Like we live in the same town, as in my parents-in-law live 300 meters from my current residence. And when we move to the other side of Bruges, which will be, I mean, by bike, 25, 30 minutes, or 10 minutes in the car, that's going to be a huge difference because my son loves the fact that he can walk out of our driveway and walk to Oma.
And that's how I grew up.
And it's a daily thing.
I grew up literally like my mom built a house next door to her mom. So I would just walk across the yard to my grandma's house.
Yeah.
And it's just so like, you know, in your head that it's amazing to see your family that you grew up with your child that means so much to you. But we live in a completely different country than both sets of grandparents. So we don't get to see it all that often. And just like seeing Lila with my family is just amazing. Like she's just the center of attention all the time. She's the most loved person in the room, and she deserves that.
That's lovely.
Oh yeah, all the feels. Yeah. That's Harry. But now there's another baby in the family, whom he loves.
Yeah.
But he's not the favorite. I can tell you that because my obsession is linked to sleep, and he sleeps at Oma and Opa's once a week. And it's a bit of a joke now that when Harry wakes up at 5 a.m., they'll call us to come and get him because my toddler has decided that 5 a.m. is the new time to get up. And it doesn't matter what we do to the schedule.
It's not, no.
I'm sure there's going to be some parents listening to this who can relate if you got this far into the episode. But it is hard starting your day at 5. I am no longer a Queenslander. I do not get up at 4:30. It's dark. It's currently dark here till after 8 o'clock in the morning. So it feels like by the time we get to noon, I've lived the whole day. It's awful.
I totally know how you feel.
So my obsession is like I am Googling everything about sleep and trying to figure out what is going on in my toddler's head right now.
Oh my God.
So it's fun. Yeah. Everything is a season. Everything is a season.
Matt, what about you? Got any obsessions?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the final season of the Netflix show Sex Education. I don't know if you guys have got it there.
Yes.
Yeah, love that
show. I'm watching it too currently.
It's so good. It's for those who haven't seen it, it's a British comedy set in a high school and follows the travails of the characters there around their sexual identity and relationships and all that. And it's so beautifully written with so much heart, and I just really love how complicated all of the characters are and how likable they are for their humanness. I think it's just really clever writing and really relatable writing, with a particular focus for me on the character of Eric, played by Ncuti Gatwa, who to me is just one of the greatest and most enjoyable characters I've just ever watched in any TV or film. Just so beautifully written and beautifully played. I would watch anything that this guy is in, and I think he's going to be the next Doctor in Doctor Who, which is really cool.
I was going to say, does that mean you're going to watch Doctor Who?
Yeah, I've seen bits of Doctor Who in the past, but this will probably get me back into it because I think he's just a fantastic actor. And yeah, it's a lovely show. For those who haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. It's very, very funny, but also just full of heart and just makes you feel good.
It's just so good. It's so good. I love it. I'm like sad it's ending, but also happy because you never want them to like stretch it out until it's not as good anymore.
Are you obsessed with the fashion as well, Abby? Like the fashion is on a different level.
It really is. It really is. It's like, so colorful, and especially this final season. There's some new characters in this final season that just really add to it. Yeah.
I don't know what it's like for you guys in Australia and Abby, the various different places
wherever
that you frequent. But how are teenagers dressing? Because there's definitely a trend here. It's the, like the straight bootleg, really baggy jeans and then the oversized sweaters.
Yeah, that's in here as well.
Is that a thing? Oh, okay. They all clones. Yeah. Like when Hannes and I walk in Bruges, because the main secondary schools are all in the centre of Bruges, they go out on their lunch breaks to buy lunch and hang out. And like it's just like groups, they all dress identically. There's definitely no colour like you see in Sex Education. My partner was saying, they could take a leaf out of their book. And I was just thinking back to my youth and how differently we dress. But yeah, I was just curious if this is a thing right now.
And also white New Balance sneakers, right? That's very much a thing at the moment.
All of them. But hey, I think they're really into like the secondhand market. So, I'm all for that.
Matt, I agree with you about the actor who plays Eric in that show. Like he had such a small role in the Barbie movie, but I still feel like he was just, whenever he was on screen, it made me smile. And I loved the crossover between the Barbie movie and because they also had the other actress from Sex Education in the Barbie movie as well. And the two of them at the end, there was a moment between the two of them that was really cool. But I agree. Like, so I stopped watching Doctor Who when, I was going to say Lewis Capaldi, but that's not the actor.
Peter Capaldi.
That's the singer. Yeah. When he became the Doctor, it petered off a little bit. I tried to stay in it because I was so excited for the first female Doctor, but they lost me a bit. But I am just so excited for the new season of the Doctor. I'm so excited to see what he does with the role. It's going to be really cool.
Yep, 100% agree. Can't wait.
All right, let's wrap it up. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll be back next week to talk about Guangxi and what we've got for the rankings. What we know about the rankings, what we know about the relegation, which is going to be solidified later in the year, but we can make our guesses. So thanks everyone for listening, and we'll be back.